everybody, welcome to Chapter 7, Colliders. Now, this chapter is relatively short, especially as far as making different changes in the game. So this week we'll probably also jump into, start getting into Chapter 8 as well. So make sure you check your folder this week, and if you also see some Chapter 8 videos, you'll need to check those out as well. Alright, so when we're talking about games, we have to build the physics in there. And so you need to understand a couple of the physics things. Obviously, mass. The bigger an object is, the more mass it has. But it's not like that in Unity. You know, if I take two different sprites and one's big and one's small, they're both going to typically have the exact same mass. So if you want to make a change where a small object bounces off a bigger object and the bigger object is not really pushed that much, or you want to see a bigger object maybe fall faster than a smaller object, stuff like that, you'll need to adjust the mass. But just don't forget, Unity typically treats most objects the same, assuming you didn't make any changes. So again, if you pop in two sprites, it's going to assume their mass is relatively the same. Alright, and then the rule for Unity is typically the mass index of one element should not greatly exceed that of other elements. So they're saying is you can play with the mass, but you should not play with it too much. Alright, and then gravity, the force pushing you down to the ground. Most games typically keep this at a realistic rate, except for 2D platformers where you can jump 3 times your height. But it depends on what game you're playing. By default, like the Call of Duty, you typically can't jump that high. But some servers have gravity turned down so you can jump higher. And then force is the amount of force that's applied when you jump or when an enemy bumps into you or something like that. So that's force. Obviously, the more force I have, the higher I can jump. So think of gravity as, the setting for pressing down on somebody, and think of force as the force of going up. Alright, then your book goes into a little bit of 2D versus 3D, and they talk about 6 degrees of freedom, or 6 DOF. And basically, in a 3D game, you have 6 degrees of freedom. I can go left, right, up, down, and then forward, back. So there's my 3 degrees. And then I have my 3 rotations I can also do. I can rotate on the X, the Y, and the Z axis. So that's 6 different degrees that I can move in. Well, obviously, with 2D, we don't have the Z axis, so we only really have like 2 degrees of movement. Well, 4 if you count the rotation. So we can only really rotate on the Z-axis in 2D. Again, we're 3D, we have the other 2 axes, the X and the Y, we can rotate on. If you look at your book on page 121, it shows you rotation on the different axes. If I rotate on the Y-axis, all of a sudden my character kind of like turns to the left and he starts to get very skinny. If I rotate on the X-axis, his feet come up and his head goes back, and then again I start not being able to see him because eventually he'll just be a line on the screen. So those rotations aren't typically used in 2D games. But I can rotate on the Z-axis if that's needed. Now in our platformer game, we're only going to go up, down, left, and right, so we're only going to have 2 degrees of freedom. Where in some 2D games, you may be able to rotate on the Z-axis. So just keep in mind, 6 DOF just means 6 degrees of freedom. I can move in 6 different directions. The 3 axes and then the 3 rotations. And then with 2D, we typically tend to cut those down. Alright, and then your game goes into adjusting the physics. And on page 122, they kind of give you a picture. And if you want to do this, it's on Edit, Project Settings, and then Physics 2D. So here I am in Unity. If I go to Edit, Project Setting, and then Physics 2D, over here in my inspector, all the physics stuff pops up. Now your book tells you what all these different settings do, but you can see gravity is a big one. And then you may be wondering, well, what's a raycast? Well, raycast, think about if I shoot a laser from my weapon or to you, that's a raycast. I'm shooting like a beam of light or a ray. Alright, and this bottom part here is referred to as the layer collision matrix. So this says, what can collide with something else. So you should uncheck the player, so the player should not collide with the player. And then after that, it's up to you. If you look at the picture in the book, it shows that the enemy can't interact with the pickups or something like that. So as we add different layers and different items like player, ground, enemy, that kind of stuff, they'll be populated here, and then we can say, okay, I don't want the enemy to interact with the coin boxes or something like that. All right, and these are overall settings, so everything in your game will be affected by these settings here. All right, and then when you want to get rid of that, just click on player, and you're back to normal stuff. All right, then your book goes into rigid bodies. And a rigid body is a component that you apply to your sprite or your character, and then the physics actually apply to the rigid body. So the rigid body is kind of like, I like to think about it, it's your skeleton. So everything like applies to your skeleton, and without your skeleton, you wouldn't have a movable body. You would just be a lump of skin and muscle. So using the rigid body, I can actually change the different settings. So let's say everything has a mass of 1 in the game. Well, I can make my player have a mass of 5. So he's heavier than regular objects in the game. So you can see the different settings that we have there, and they're covered in your book on page 124. Now, page 126, or I'm sorry, 125 at the top, you get your first instructions for the game. So before we do that, you want to go and make sure you download the Chapter 7 assets. So again, there'll be an Angel for you, so I'm just going to right-click, Import Package, Custom Package, and go to my crazy desktop that has way too much crap in it, and Unity 2D files, project files, and Chapter 7 Start. And then you can see it's going to give me another player controller. I don't want that. So you can just click off of it there. I'm going to get the player prefab, another Unity level, and another player controller. Ooh, I want the animation. No, I don't want the animation. So I'm going to skip this player controller and this, the script. Hold on a sec. I'm going to look. My player controller is just player. And it's this, I'm just gonna not grab that thing. I don't want to screw anything up. So the player controller and this I'm not gonna grab, and I'm gonna import the rest. See how that funks me up. Reload my scene, and I already have errors. No. First, let me see if my guy can work. And nope, he doesn't run anymore. Frickin'. All right, let's see what we gotta change. Alright, let me show you what I did. I went back and I imported it again. And this time I let everything come over. So I'm going to let it all come over, import. And then I got my error messages. So then go to scripts, look for player controller 1. We have player controller, which is the one we made, and then controller 1. So get rid of number 1. Then go to animations and get rid of player 1 because ours is player, so we want to get rid of, remember, it adds the number 1 to any new file that has the same name. And then go to player, and you'll see if your script is not there, add your script. So go back to scripts, player controller, make sure your player controller is under your player controller script, and you're going to have to change the jump height again. I'm just going to change mine to 350. Otherwise, he will jump way off the screen. And okay, my double jump still works, triple jump doesn't, and I can move left and right. And if I clear this, let's make sure that works. So clear that, then play. And remember these behaviors not referencing. If you double click, that's the main camera. That's the main camera. So I'll have to figure out what that is. But the rest of that stuff is typically the boxes. So we'll work on that. Alright, so if your stuff isn't straight, pause the video, go back and re-download that, and just make sure you get rid of the script that's player controller 1, get rid of the animation that's player 1, and then make sure you go back to your script, and the one script that you have, player controller here, make sure you move that back to the player under player controller script, if it's not there already, and then change your jump force. If you don't, your player will go way crazy up high. Alright, with that said, it says go to the, again, I'm on top of page 125. It says in the project browser, open up the first level. In the hierarchy screen, select your player, add component, and add a rigid body 2D game object. Well, we already have a rigid body 2D game object. It's right there. And again, if you can't see it, hit this little thing and then move up. Alright, then the last one, number 4, says make sure fixed angle is checked on and is kinematic is checked off. Now they no longer have the fixed angle. If your constraints is closed, you'll have to open your constraints, and then now they just call it the rotation, the Z rotation, and that will adjust it so we no longer rotate on the Z axis. which apparently was confusing when they called it fixed angle in the older version. So now in Unity 5, we just freeze rotation on the z-axis. And then is kinetic or is kinematic should be unchecked, so like that, and then you're good on page 25. Alright, so we got past the stupid book on page 125. Remember, skip those instructions, that you should be good. So our player already had that game object attached to it. So then we move forward to page 126, and then we start talking about colliders. So there are 4 types of colliders: circle, box, edge, and polygon. Alright, so regardless of which type of collider you make, box, circle, edge, or polygon, they all share 2 important things. And the first one's material, and then the second one is trigger. Now, material is where you can assign certain physics material to affect objects that it collides with. And then is trigger allows you to trigger certain events when that collider, hits another collider. So in short, a collider is just the sphere of influence, and whenever this circle or this box or this edge, whatever, hits something, it's going to collide. And that collision will be detected. And if it's my player's feet colliding with the ground, it'll just stop me, because I say, hey, these are 2 different layers, make sure you stop. But I may have some other triggering things happen. When I step on the bridge may fall down. When my collider hits a power-up, it may power me up. So that triggers an event, the power-up. So colliders are very important in your game. For instance, if you make your character with a box collider, and his feet are on the box collider, when he goes from like one step to the next step, it's just like a blink, and all of a sudden he's at the next step. It's not a smooth transition. But if you have a box collider at his feet, then the box collider kind of rolls over it, and then you kind of see him kind of moving up through the box, kind of like the box is rolling. I'm sorry, where the circle's rolling. Let me show an example. So we typically do our characters like this. We put a circle underneath at where their feet go, and then we put a block, around their head or something like that. And then if you're making a 2D platformer, you want to put some kind of edge here, so we have a corner so we can kind of step on platforms. And then once that corner falls off of the platform, then I fall off. And I may want to put, remember we talked about the material for the collider. Well, I may want to put a slippery material here so that when I jump in, I won't stick to things. If you remember in my game, or our game, right now when I jump and I hit things, I kind of stick. So I need to fix that too. So again, that's why colliders are so important. And there was a YouTube video that I saw over the summer that kind of shows you the difference between the box and the circle collider at the feet, and how it, like if I just did a square here at the feet, whenever I went from one level up to another level, it was just like a blink, and all of a sudden I was at the next level, so it kind of jumped. Where if I do a circle, it's kind of a gradual kind of lift kind of thing, so it's more natural. So if I ever find it, I'll link it here in this week. But again, it was over the summer. I looked again yesterday, and I still couldn't find it. So, all right. So your 2D characters are typically made out of 2 colliders, and sometimes even 3, depending on what you need to do. So in this case, we're going to do 3. You're going to do a circle collider for his feet. Then you're going to do a box collider, for the rest of the body. And then you're going to put something maybe on the outside, or just do it to the box collider, and give that a material that makes it slippery. And that way I won't stick to all the walls like that. All right, the other 2 colliders are kind of self-explanatory. An edge collider is just, or an edge collider is just a line that you can use for different situations. My character is going to run into a wall, or I want to set the ground on something. I can just make an edge collider. And then polygons are used for fitting an object perfectly. If I want that object to be able to, I want his nose to go under the wall and not collide, until I hit the bridge of the nose, I could do all these different polygon colliders on there. Now the problem with polygons are, you'll typically hear them called polys. The more colliders and polygons you have in your artwork, so again, one we're talking about artwork, so we create these models with polygons, and that's kind of how we shape these heads. And then we can also add the polys as colliders. So the more we add, it's more stuff to be drawn in the game, and there's more different things to track in the game, the slower your game is going to run. So that's why typically when you see people looking for art assets and stuff, you'll see people advertise, oh, this is low poly, meaning it doesn't have a whole lot of polys in the making of the item. So that does not refer to the collisions. Creating a character artwork through polygons and adding collision through polygons are two separate things. They look nearly identical because one's setting the crash and one's setting the shape of the head, and they're both the same shape, but they're different. One's for artwork and one's for game development. All right, and then here's where it gets weird. So there, again, in your stupid book, on page 126, 127, and 128, there's instructions. You theoretically should already have these. I'm going to go through these real quick. All right, so on the bottom of page 126, it says make sure your player object is selected, create a circle collider, set the radius. But you can see I already have a circle collider with that radius set. So if you don't, if you click on player and you go through the list and you do not have a circle collider, add that component and then set the radius at 24. But you should have that already done. And then it says set the center position to 0 and then Y to 0.3. So that part is already done. So that takes care of page 126 and 127. And then adding collision to every game object, blah, blah. So what they're telling you is to go to your prefabs and go to that grass mid. Remember, every time he's walking on a grass mid. I forget what these pieces here were named, but this top block with where it has squared corners is grass mid. So I can go to prefab, type in grass mid, and then my prefab comes up. And then mine, and I don't know if it was just something I did or if it's something because I'm downloading all the different asset packs, but mine already has 2 box colliders. So if yours has 2, if you have one and it's set to 0.5 and 0.5 on the top, and then the size is 1 and 1, you're good. And if you have 2, I'm going to turn one of them off, so just uncheck the box, and then make sure your character doesn't fall through. And he looks good, and he's not hit anything. So now I can just get rid of this. So I can go to the component and remove component. So now I only have 1. Remember, you typically only want to have 1 of each component on there. Otherwise, you can kind of get confused about which one it is. Just make sure you don't click on the block and do it. You want to click on the prefab and do it, because if I do it on the prefab, then it affects all these blocks, all bajillion blocks that I have. Now at that point it takes you to page 129, and then they tell you to, from the project browser, select the _ physics material folder. But again, I don't have the physics material folder, so go to assets, right click, create, folder. That's going to have a new folder there, and you're going to do _ physics materials. And now I have a bloop. Let me fix that for me. A physics materials folder. Now then it tells you to right click anywhere in the project browser and create physics material. So, and then later on you're going to move it. So why not just go to your physics material folder and then go to the empty spot and then go here and right click and then create physics 2D material. And then rename that ground. Alright, and then change the friction on here to 0.01. And leave bounciness at 0. Then it tells you to select the grass prefab, the mid grass. So I need to go back to prefabs, grass, mid, find my grass mid. And then select the target, wait a minute, hold on. In the inspector, select the target icon next to the materials of the collider. So I can go here to the materials, and this is the target icon they're talking about. I hope you can see this on the right. Click that little baby, and then put on ground. And then left click on ground to assign it. Hooray! And now the ground is on there. So now you've set the condition for the collider that's on that box, or in that prefab. So now I could change that bounciness on. I could go back to physics material here, and I could change bounciness to 14, and my character should theoretically bounce a little bit. Let's see. By default, he's not really bouncing. But if I go here to bounciness on ground and change it to 15, I have no idea what this will do. Ooh! Ooh, what? Okay, you don't want to do that. So let's make bounciness 1 and see what happens. Hey! I'm such a kid. Whee! Alright, we need to get rid of that. So we need to change that bounciness to 0. And then go back to my prefab, and I'm all good. Make sure that this isn't funked up. Alright, good. So, that worked as expected. Alright, at that point you should be all done with page 29. Then they go into constraints. So constraints are limitations, things that we can apply to when the rigid 2D body hits. So now we'll do something cool. So we're gonna put a hinged object like a trapdoor onto the bridge. So when he walks over the bridge kind of falls down, and he has to get off there fast. All right. So now let me close this stuff all up. So now on page 130, I'm at the bottom. So from the hierarchy pane, select the scene 14. So I want to go to scene 14. And then left click one of the bridge objects to select it. So bridge. And then they tell you hit the F key. You just double click bridge, it'll take you right there. Now we don't want to focus on that one, we want to start on the left one. And then it says to select the leftmost bridge and then rename it to bridge A. So I'm going to right click this, rename, and I'm going to call it bridge. And then do dash A, nope, just capital A. Bridge A. Hooray! Alright, so then with bridge A selected, and obviously that's what's in the inspector, you're going to add component, you're going to go to physics 2D, and then they want you to add a, what collider was that again? It was the Hinge Joint 3D. Hinge Joint 3D. And then they want you to go to the next one, and they want you to rename this to bridge B. Rename bridge B, and then they want you to do the same thing, add physics 2D hinge joint, and we'll set this in just a minute, and then they want you to go to the last one and rename that one to bridge C, and then add component physics 2D hinge joint. So now I have hinge joints on all three of these. So the different joints allow us to trigger different events. So in this case, the enable collision says, hey, if a rigid body hits this, I want to mark that as something that's going on, and then I want to move the hinge or do whatever the joint does. And then which rigid body am I talking about? Like which rigid body, when it hits this, am I going to activate this for? And then where's it going to hit me at? Where's the activation point going to be? All right, and then the rest of the stuff is on the bottom of page 131. So then if we move over to page 132, we got more stuff to do. So number 1, select bridge A. Number 2, hey, find the hinge joint. If it's not there, well, we just added it, so I'm sorry, I need to go back to A. So make sure you're on bridge A and go to his. Don't rename it like I just did. Make sure it's bridge A, and then you're over here. All right, and then 3, change the anchor Y to 0.14. And then step 4 says change the connected anchor values to 130.9 for X, 130.9 for X, and 1 for Y. The connected anchor point should sit on the slope for the adjacent terrain piece. Alright, after that we go to bridge B, and then now we're in his joint part. So select bridge B. This time we'll need to attach 2 hinge joint components to the bridge. This is because this will anchor this piece to the other 2 bridge elements. So if I'm doing this right, it looks like with bridge B we're going to add another hinge joint component, physics 2D hinge joint. And what they want us to link one hinge joint to this piece and then one hinge joint to the other piece. And that way if this piece falls off, it triggers this to fall off. And if this piece falls down, it'll trigger this one to fall down. Alright, so with the second one added, we're going to start at the first one, and we're going to say, hey, the first one's going to attach to the left, second one's going to attach to the right. So here, what they say is which rigid body you're going to connect to, and we're going to click the little target thing and say that's going to connect to bridge A. And just double click and that'll go away. And then I think that takes care of 2 and 3. And then we go to 4. Now we need to set the value. So they want Y, set the Y anchor to 0.14. And then on connected anchor, they want X at 1, and then they want the Y again to 0.14. Alright. Alright, then you go to the second hinge component, and then you connect this one to bridge C, and anchor value 1 and 1/4, so 1 and 0.14, and connected anchor 0.14 for Y. And that's good. So now we need to go to bridge C, and again I'm on page 133, almost near the middle, and go to his vig, and anchor value for X he has 1. Stupid numlock. Crazy. And then for Y he has 0.275. Alright, and then for connected anchor he has 134.1. Woo! Gotta get all. Oh, I did a minus. Come on. And set the Y value to 1. Alright, so let's see if we got this set up right. And wow, that's kind of neat. So you see that little piece there? That's when the collider hits that, that'll trigger the fall right there. So let's try that sucker out. Now remember, this is on scene 14, so it's going to take me a little while to get there. La 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 la. Oh, stupid! No, get me off! Get. Ah, this frickin' thing. So close. And I can't get out of it either. Oh, no, 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 do something, do it, no. Alright, let me pause this, get out of here. Alright, let's try it again. Ooh. Don't jump. Oh, yes, got me over there. Bad idea. 1, 2. Sweet. As you can see, 2D is not my cup of tea. Alright, there's our bridge. It looks all funky. And if I run over it... Hey, wait a minute. Something's supposed to happen. Whoa. Well, that's not quite what we wanted, was it? Alright guys, I was a little bit off. For some reason I was under the impression that when we walked over the bridge would fall down. But that's not the case. And I don't know what I was thinking, because this is a hinge joint. So hinge joints obviously are like the hinges on the door. They just kind of move. So what's supposed to happen is the bridge is supposed to kind of like go down under the weight. So if you jump up and down on it, the bridge is supposed to go up and down a little bit. Kind of like a real rope bridge. So that being said, I want to go into the hinge joint things and kind of give it a little bit better explanation for. So his measurements were off in the book. Basically, he had us take our first piece, our bridge B, and he had it like connected to this piece, and then this piece connects to these two, and then this piece connects to this one. So if you look at the picture at the bottom of page 133, you can see on the left and right side of the bridge, there's a dot on the green grass holding those together, or connecting those. So my bridge isn't going to fall down because it's all like lined up, and then the physics are all saying, hey, make sure this doesn't fall apart, so it's connected. Now your anchors, your hinge joint has 2 anchors. So there's anchor and then there's connected anchor. And these get a little bit confusing. The anchor is the point where your sprite is going to rotate. That's the pivot point of the sprite. So if I grab the anchor here, and what I do is I move mine. So if I click on anchor and then grab it, now I can move it. You can kind of see the amounts on the anchor are moving. So I want my anchor to be right there, because that's where I want the pivot point to be on my bridge. I could actually pivot it up there if I wanted to, on that little point on the corner, but I'm just going to leave mine there in the middle. Now this is also going to kind of prop our bridge up a little bit, which is probably a bad idea, but for demonstration purposes it'll help. Now that anchor does not have to be. I keep clicking off of it. Let me move this to. If I move it to 2, then I can grab it. But if you put it here and then you try to grab it, you're going to just change the size of your sprite. So remember, Control Z will take you back. Go back to your anchor and 2, and then now I can grab it again. The anchor can actually be outside of the sprite itself, and that way it can just be attached to space, and then your anchor would kind of like rotate in space. So if I put the anchor here, my stuff would kind of like rotate down, and there would be a space between the rotation point and the sprite. In some cases, you might want to do that if you have a pendulum or something like that. Now, the connected anchor, I'm still a little fuzzy on that, because if you listen to their tutorials and stuff, it just says you place this on the point in the world where you want the hinge to kind of be placed. So one is where you want the sprite to rotate, and then the other is where you want the hinge to be placed. Now, most of the time, these are going to be placed on the same point. So if I put that there and then put that there, that's a perfect hinge. And then if I move that down, you can see they don't move together, so then I got to go grab that and move it back down. Now if I hit play, assuming everything worked alright, there's my bridge, and now you can kind of see, it goes up and down just like a rope bridge when I jump on it. So now I need to fix that other side to kind of make it smooth. So again, if I go here, if I move it up so I can kind of see the points, I'm going to grab the anchor and move it to 2 so I can play with it. So I'll put that there. Alright, and that's just not grabbing on like the other one did. Now let me grab the connected anchor and move that off. Move that there, and now, come here you little boop. Let's see if that works. Alright, close enough for government work. So there's my bridge. It kind of goes up and down when I kind of walk on it. If I jump up and down, it goes up and down like a real rope bridge. Now obviously I could play with that a little bit more and maybe configure to get it a little bit better so that when I walk over it, it kind of goes down more. But you get the point. You understand how it works now. Now there's other stuff that we're not going to cover yet. Like I could turn a motor on. So what I could do is I could go to this sprite. Like let's say this was something that was up in the air like this. I could say use motor and then set the motor speed, and then this would start rotating based on the speed of the motor. So if I wanted to have like a saw blade spinning or something like that, this is where I would do that at. Alright, and then when you use the motor, the maximum motor force is the torque, the maximum torque you can actually apply. So, like how much resistance to something coming in, or how much, really I guess the word is just torque. And then the last part, use limits. That just limits you from doing a full rotation. So like if I had this up in space and this was just spinning, if I put limits on it, it would only spin so much. Like it would only go like down and up. So if I wanted to make a trap door, I could use limits and say, hey, just go down here and then come back up. So you get the idea. I'm going to grab the Unity tutorial and pop it in here as well to this week's folder, just so you guys can see that stuff. Because you really, as we're putting this together, it's great that you can make the game, but I want you to also understand Unity and all the different settings and things you can do. And this first rope bridge is kind of a neat idea to introduce into the hinge joint, but there's a lot of other things that we can do with that. So I'm hoping as we go through this book, we'll find more things that we can do. Maybe we'll do a trapdoor, maybe we'll do I'm pretty sure eventually we'll do a bridge that's falling. Alright, so put that back, line that up, make sure it still works. Yay! Bloop! Alright, I'm good. Alright, now they say there's also, I'm on your book on page 134. So blah blah blah, last we went over this, so in this our scene, recreate the bridge. So it's not specific, it just says recreate this bridge for the other rope bridge elements of our scene. So if I go out, there's a big one here with 5, and then I think there's 2 more over here on the left. Yeah, there's those 2. Now it's up to you. You can do whatever you want to do. So if you want to just do the rope bridge thing, you can, so it kind of bends down. If you want to make kind of a trap door thing where if you step on it, it starts to move down and do the lower limit thing, you can. If you want to remove these 2 pieces, let me go back over here. If I want to remove these 2 pieces, and make this guy spin there in place, so I have to jump over that, you can do that as well. Remember, just add the hinge joint, put the pivot points in the middle, and then make it, put the motor on it. Let me try that real quick. So I'm going to grab this, I got that piece there, and I'm going to add physics 2D, hinge joint here. Alright, and then I'm going to take, I can't move that there. I want the thing to spin right there. If I move that to 2, then I can place that in the middle, and then I can go grab that to 2. Where the heck? Alright, where in the heck did that thing go? Woo! Oh, come on, really? Oh, I suck at this, don't I? Put that there. Add a motor. Motor speed 5. And we'll leave the torque there. Now I need to go grab my player, so I can just spawn right there. Oh, really? Come on! Alright, move left. Click the player. That'd be an easier way to do this. One of you guys knows the easier way, and you're laughing at me right now. Alright, so I'll leave him there. And zoom in and see if that works. Ooh, that motor's kind of slow. So let's fix that motor a little bit. Speed 50. Alright, baby. Oh. So that would be kind of a cool thing too. So a lot of cool things you can do with these joints. So don't be afraid to experiment and do different things and make different obstacles. So now we can turn a rope bridge into, kind of a hazard like that, where you either have to jump over or you have to jump on at the right time. So over here in this one with 5, assuming if I couldn't jump over all 5 spaces, at this point in time, obviously we can. But I could just have this one rotating or spinning so that I'd have to jump on that and then jump again. Alright, and then that pretty much wraps up Chapter 7. Just make sure, when you're done, you do File, Save Scene, and then File, Save Project. Alright, so go ahead and work on that. Make sure your bridges are all working fine. And then I think we'll probably start a little bit of Chapter 8. So, we'll see you in the next video.